from an undisclosed location in the Great Western Desert in the land of the free and autonomous Native American people. The 2024 presidential campaign in the next time to return all U.S. land back to their rights owners. This is the Ben Zion Podcast. Techno-communism.
Welcome back to the Ben Zion Podcast, and I'm excited. We're having our guest, Dr. Ian Hale, tomorrow to talk about biogerontology and the prospect of using better institutions to see that this field becomes a public health standard, to see that universal superlongevity is achieved. And that is, I think, a logical next step after the needs of human beings of the more basic kind are met. As I've said, there's 1 billion people on Earth who do not even have clean water or proper food for much of their lives. As a result, they live unnaturally short lives. These are overwhelmingly people in the global South. There's many hundreds of millions, or perhaps 1 billion or more, who are on the same razor's edge by Western standards. Perhaps they are not malnourished in quite the same number, but they are still not being taken care of by the capitalists who dictate the terms of all of these things to folks. You say, Ben, how are they dictating the terms of all of these things to folks? Well, the United States has killed 100 million people in the last 150 years, almost basically all in the global South, and almost all of them people of color. And why were these people killed? They were mostly civilians. Why were they killed? Because they did not immediately comply with the fascist U.S. and the West that they represent. They did not immediately comply with their directive to hand over their resources and create institutions and government functions that would allow for the pilfering and robbing of resources from those countries. They had the audacity to try to build a humane and sustainable economic system. For that, the United States will send boots on the ground and murder them. It's happened for quite a long time. It's happened over and over again. This has evolved into the standard of proxy wars. The United States doesn't always have their name on those things, but they're still doing it. This is the United States is nothing if not a violent psychopath in the form of a state. And this is a sad state of affairs. So when you say that things are being arranged, it's not just an act of God that these 1 billion people have no food and water. It's not just a set of circumstances beyond anyone's control. There are people who have arranged this in this way, very very intentionally. Is it because they are is hate their motive in doing this? Not exactly. They're of course hateful people, but greed is their motive. Greed and power, and the cruelty is incidental. But this is why we have to speak out against this and stand against this and organize in ways to remove this. And it's why I'm running for president. I have only one goal in that, and that is to perhaps make you think about these things, but also in that in the forming of that administration itself, my goal is to end the United States federal government by an executive order that will be signed on day one, and that executive order describes the orderly dismantling of the federal government and the duties of it that are necessary, not these militaristic duties, but the other duties that are necessary, being overseen by 13 districts controlled by alliances of tribal councils from these United States. There are reservations in great number around the United States, so much so that these 13 districts, which would represent United States contiguous lands and outlying areas and territories, would each be jointly controlled by tribal councils. Ensure peace in that transition period. More importantly, the most important factor in doing something like this, which is Um, Pretty unprecedented on this continent. But the precedent, by contrast, is fascism, murdering Native people, murdering Black people, making life a living hell for working people. So that's not a good precedent. We need to break that precedent and set new precedents. But the most important um, um, uh, institution that needs to be broken there is the protection of ecocidal organizations and businesses. That is effectively the United States' primary job description. Is protecting private wealth and doing all kinds of sneaky things to see that private wealth is protected while maintaining the thinnest veneer of objectivity and plausible deniability as to its actions. We need to end all of that. And the only way to do that is to end the military industrial complex, to end the militaristic and fascistic monster that exists to no real end. And it's a form of madness, right? It is a form of madness because we know that the Earth is dying. We know that not only is the United States military the number one polluter, but it's the protector of all of the other super polluting organizations, corporations. Its only real job is to protect them. So the rest of humanity, the people of the United States and the rest of humanity, have no choice but to accept this insane fascistic mandate of killing the planet and not allowing future generations to live in the way that we have had that luxury. And that is, of course, a horrible, horrible thing. Um, I'm wearing a Black Lives Matter T-shirt, and I think on the very first episode of this reboot, I was wearing a shirt that said "A Revolution Against Aging and Death," and that's something I'm going to talk about a little bit on this show and on the upcoming show with Dr. Hale. Um, that rad organization is not one that I want to explicitly endorse, but nevertheless, their ideas are very good. And the only reason that I don't necessarily want to endorse them is because they are not the I don't perceive them to be the greatest allies to Marxists. So some of the ideas of people like this, I will of course try to put a more humane spin on, but I will not endorse them. And to a lesser degree, perhaps only a slightly lesser degree, we could say this of the Black Lives Matter organization. Of course, the underlying ideas need to be trumpeted from the highest hill. But Black Lives Matter is Democratic Party captured in recent years, the organization itself. So they shouldn't necessarily get an explicit endorsement from anyone, nor should they necessarily be explicitly disendorsed. But you should say these things. We need to aim a little bit higher. I'm going to start off before we get into matters in the life sciences to do with human health. I'm going to start off with something a little more lighthearted. I hope you'll enjoy it. This is so you perhaps know that I like to make pamphlets and and artwork with more or less in the style of an infographic. I think this work of mine has gotten better over time. Certainly, messaging has gotten clearer. And I would like to think you might watch the show and find it pretty incoherent. I don't know what's going through your head. I hope that it's not too strange of information to for folks to process. I hope that in time people will come to embrace these things that I have. It's not been something that happened overnight. As I said on maybe 2 episodes ago, it was only a few short years ago that some of the things that I was saying would now regard as reprehensible capitalist apologism. And so I don't have the right to pass judgment on any of you. What in the course of this 21st century of ours, in the course of a human lifespan, in the course of history itself, such as we understand it, what is the difference between 3 years, between one person coming to some right conclusions slightly before or slightly after another? It's very little difference, relatively speaking. So the idea, and when I do say talk about these things in strident or even kind of abusive tones on this program or elsewhere, it's only because we need to put that emphasis on it. People are not responding appropriately to the death of the planet. People will say, well, you'll catch more flies with honey, but those people themselves are not trying to catch those flies. By their actions, even just by that statement itself, they're trying to stop people from agitating and moving away from this doomed status quo. So you can't trust people who will say that. Those people have another kind of ulterior motive, whether they are admitting it to themselves or not. This, however, this is from cnet.com. You know, don't not an endorsement of CNET itself. This is a cute story. This bizarre robot uses AI to paint whatever you tell it to. So it's a combination of a robotic arm that has fine motor capabilities and an AI art generator. Ooh, that's kind of neat. Probably not cheap. Not as cheap as the AI art generators, which many of them have a free or freemium model. AI art leaps from pixels to real life canvases with the help of the robot arm that's like DALL-E with a paintbrush. DALL-E was I forgot the name of it. I couldn't think of it 2 episodes ago. And every time that happens, I think I'm going to add something in the comments. I never do. A lot of times it'll happen that I'll misspeak and then I'll be editing for form in taking a few minutes to edit. And I'll realize that I misspoke or forgot something or mislabeled something, and I'll think I'll add that to the comments. And I haven't been doing as good about doing that as I should. So here's a live edit. DALL-E was the name of that first AI art generator that I started playing with, which is viewed as more of a novelty relative to the others. But it's the thing that made it go viral, is that sort of more playful or less professional looking kind of quality. But it was the thing and it was also someone just saying, hey Ben, there's AI art generators that are a lot better than DALL-E that you could be using for whatever you want. That then made me want to do that, and so that person, whose name I don't even recall, is in some sense responsible for me coming to a kind of something of a new creative place with using AI art, which is then edited by myself, usually using a variety of other apps on the phone, into pamphlets with a Marxist tech accelerationist or techno-communist. I use those interchangeably on this program. Neither of those are words in common parlance, but I hope them to be. Certainly the ideas are what matters. Doesn't matter that there's a guy named Ben Zion. Doesn't matter that he's trying to tell you that you should be a techno-communist. Those words don't matter. The ideas behind them, in opposition to the techno-fascists who are sneakily taking over your world, and that is what matters. And that is the thing that I hope that you will take to heart and share with others. You don't have to. So, by God, if you call yourself a Ben Zionist, what's wrong with you? No, that's not true. If you're a Ben Zionist, go for it. So DALL-E was a fun one, and thanks to that person. And also, this is something that you should always remember. Whatever the techno-fascists, whatever the status quo personas, professional or amateur, the folks I've mentioned that technofuturism is dominated by those two profiles, people who you could describe as CIA operatives, and people who are unwitting followers of CIA operatives. Almost overwhelmingly, the people fit one of those two categories. But then that's reflective of the failings of the larger North American society, in much the same numbers. So those people who are manipulating and being manipulated, the manipulators have a different kind of. They're not enlightening folks. They're not inspiring folks. What they're essentially doing is finding little memes and talking points and various dirty tricks to beat everyone into submission, which takes a lot of tiny hammers. But to inspire someone takes maybe perhaps just one hammer. There's not enough of you inspiring relative to them. But nevertheless, this example of a person telling Ben Zion to start using an AI art generator in the context of this sort of thing is an example of someone just saying some simple thing that's true that changes this sort of thing, and it's true in things more directly relevant to activism or a revolutionary action. I could list many, many other examples of a situation where someone yelled at me and called me an idiot, but what they said was true, and I took it to heart and changed and did what I can to change my behavior. And I would imagine there's still about 100 things like this that I'm wrong on, and I hope to find my way um, toward the better thinking there. This is true of all of us. We all need to be evolving, and that's why I don't immediately dismiss the fisticuffs of Twitter. It's and social media more broadly. It's last episode there was talk of Elon Musk acquiring Twitter and the strange things that he's doing with it. He immediately had this motley crew of alt-right and far-right personalities in his wake, and they were all saying comedy is now legal again on Twitter. Free speech is back to Twitter. Of course, that was a form of a calculated misdirection on his part and their part, because what happened was they're diminishing people's reach. I mentioned that at the exact moment that views were falling off precipitously, and people were being shadow banned, and only those people who would rightly be described as some kind of CIA operative or asset are allowed to have a voice. At that exact moment, when this marketplace of ideas is being corrupted in this way, was the moment when they started putting beside every tweet the number of views. So you think, wow, now 1,000 views, that's so many. But it's come down. But you weren't looking at those views in a regular way, and other people weren't able to see your views in that way. So when they started showing it, it was a calculated step to make people think that they're getting a lot more reach, when in fact in that time frame, reach was being diminished. And this is what happened in Facebook, and even in equally absurd ways over a longer period of time, and less transparent ways. But it's all quite transparent, and it's all quite disgusting. Back to our little robot friend. Remember the olden days when AI tools like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion turned your short text prompts into digital art? That's so 2022. Meet Frida, an AI-driven robot out of Carnegie Mellon University that transforms your prompts into physical paintings, complete with bold strokes, brush strokes, and a variety of techniques. Yeah. Oh, it's for you, of course. And if you can afford to spend $40,000 on the tool for the common man, and a variety of techniques. Perhaps most strikingly, the bot can change course as it paints to mimic the iterative nature of making art. That's kind of neat. It will work with its failures, and it will alter its goals. Peter Sheldon-Brand, a PhD student at CMU's School of Computer Science and one of the robot's creators, said in a video describing the project. Frida aims to explore the intersection of robots and creativity, says the team, which presents its research paper this May at the IEEE International Conference on Robotics and Automation in London. Robots have produced art before and even exhibited it, but Frida is designed expressly to collaborate with humans using the same sort of generative intelligence that drives experimental tools like the AI chatbot ChatGPT, commonly discussed on this show. You shouldn't think of that either as an endorsement for the ChatGPT product or for OpenAI. It's almost used as a shorthand to talk about NLP, natural language processing breakthroughs, by myself on this show and by many, many others who have a deeper knowledge of these things than I do. In fact, I would say, unlike what I said of other organizations, I would go so far as to say that OpenAI, the people at RAD, the people at Black Lives Matter are trying to do what they can to make a difference. They've been interfered with. That's not true of a corporation. A corporation is a different sort of devil. We should always be exploring and promoting and scheming toward open source alternatives to things like OpenAI and ChatGPT. We should be learning as much as we can about what China is doing, and what anything that is distinct from a corporate product run by people like the PayPal mafia, the kinds of folks who own ChatGPT. Frida is not generating the ideas to communicate, Sheldon-Brand said. That's where humans come in, communicating goals for Frida with text inputs. Same formula as other natural language processing products, as AI art generators. They can also show the bot images in the style they like, or even flash photographs they want to see represented as a painting. You can do that. So I don't know how much you've played with AI art generators, but you can use source material. So let's say you have to make clip art for a project, and there's a piece that you really, really like, but you might get a copyright strike or somebody pushing back on you using it. You can plug it into an AI art generator and then change the image closeness to 85%, 90%. You'll get a distinct image that is quite similar in style and form to the original image, but you would not get a copyright strike for. That's kind of neat for your personal or other undertakings. This is people will say, "Oh, this is you're stealing artists' work." Okay, we don't want to steal from individual artists, but the system of copyright itself in the United States overwhelmingly protects corporations. That's why there's Disney products that the laws themselves are crafted for folks like Disney. That's why there's Disney products that have the copyright has long outlived the original artists, or and does not directly benefit their estates oftentimes, even. So the corporation is God. So in that system wherein the corporation has a godlike power over others and dictates the terms of all legal affairs, that's not a system that you should be trying to uphold against something undermining it. That's something that you should be trying to undermine at every turn, including, in my view, in this way. In every way, don't buy anything. Don't subscribe to any service. You say, "Oh, Ben, well, you like this show. Why are you telling us to steal from them?" Because they have a corporate parent, and because 4 times out of 10, those products are being run through CIA office that make sure that essentially all mainstream media is produced in a State Department friendly way. So you're paying people not only to propagandize you, with capitalist propaganda, but capitalist propaganda that's specifically tailored to continue the ecocidal behavior that I described at the top of this show. You're paying someone to help kill your world and yourself. Are you insane? Again, your every action and every word nearly reflects more of an empathy for the worst people alive. The capitalist master manipulator, the fascist, the militarist. You're more concerned about those people's wants, those people's feelings, than you are concerned about your own health and well-being, about those of your loved ones, about those of the larger civil society upon which your loved ones and yourselves' health and wellness rely. That's madness. Utter fucking madness. I'll get on now to our discussion of two articles like this one. I won't read either of these articles in their entirety. This is in anticipation of talking to Dr. Hale tomorrow about biogerontology, activism, and organizing and the forging of new institutions that will lead to universal superlongevity. This is from ScienceAlert.com. Transplanting a gene common in centenarians could rewind the heart's age by years. I don't know how many people on the subscription list who are watching this or who are catching sight of this link on other social media are ardent life extensionists. I can say that the subscription list has been around longer than this new reboot of the program. So some of them might be, and those people particularly might be intrigued by something that has to do with emerging biomedicine, life extension science. This is from David Neild, and it's from February 9th, 2023. Age catches up with us all eventually, but in some people, the right genes can make that chase into our twilight years a relatively leisurely one. A few years ago, Italian researchers discovered something special about people who live well into their 90s and beyond. They commonly have a version of a gene called BPIFB4. BPIFB4, that protects against cardiovascular damage and keeps the heart in good shape for a longer period of time. So this is to do with unusually long-lived people, people that live 100 years, or centenarians, and they seem to sometimes share this gene that contributes to heart health. By introducing the mutated gene into older mice, scientists have now seen how the variant rewinds markers of biological heart aging by equivalent of more than 10 human years. Middle-aged mice, the same therapy was shown to halt the decline of heart function. How quickly the heart and its nearest blood vessels typically decay depends on numerous factors, including how much we drink and whether or not we smoke. Yeah, don't drink or smoke. Based on the study's results, mutations in protein encoding genes also have a key part to play. The longevity-associated variant of the BPIFB4 gene that the researchers looked at is already associated with longevity in people and is frequently found in individuals who live longer than normal, including those in their late 90s and beyond. This finding prompted the researchers to take a closer look at the variant's physiological effects. The rest of the article continues in a little more technical detail. I won't share it, but this is the kind of thing that is of interest to people who are radical life extensionists. And I will preface it as always a caveat. Oh, well, there's always a caveat, but yeah, there's always a caveat. This is not a worthy undertaking until we learn to take care of ourselves and one another and build a stable civil society, in my view. Those projects might be run concurrently. Attempts to fix other institutions and attempts to build these institutions might coincide in time. But most of the people are doing who are radical life extensionists are interested in that to the exclusion of building a real civil society that is able to even sustain any of this. So they do not, for example, support a public health service. They are overwhelmingly people with some neoliberal strain, and so they support privatized health and research and healthcare systems. That is very unfortunate because if we had a public health service that took care of these basic needs, we could then move on quite quickly to having a public health service that treats aging as a disease, which is really not so sufficiently so much different. A mandate, right? Health is health, but you have to do the basic care for people. It's a triage kind of situation, and people not honoring that for the most part in these communities. But that does not mean that the projects themselves are unworthy. It only means that we need to, people who are more influenced by socialist lines of thought, people who have a humane and sustainable economic system as their stated goal and are willing to do what is necessary to advance those goals. That means that you need to become the people who are influencers in all of these areas, like life extension and this. So these people then become less relevant, or they will evolve. As I have said, I believe my views have changed on these things over the years. More in the line of thinking of what is just and right, what would be the humane economic system there. You will invariably come to the conclusion that Marxist-Leninist thinkers had the right idea. You might some folks might say I like all of these things. I'm not a Marxist-Leninist. I'm this or that. I'm not going to call myself a Marxist tech accelerationist as you do, but I still agree with everything that you're saying. I've had people say this to me. You should have the courage of your convictions to be a communist. Quite simply because all of these people who are the little hammers chipping away at the stability of your civil society, all of those people are anti-communists. Fascism is anti-communism, and they won't admit that. They're doing what you're doing. They're moving goalposts and using weasel words and weasel concepts to obfuscate the harm that they're doing, and it's part of a kind of denial and a kind of a psychological defense mechanisms that people will naturally develop, and it's developed here in this spheres of ideology just as easily to rationalize operating in less than optimal conditions. These are the kind of contradictions that people like Karl Marx and people like Vladimir Ilyich Lenin wrote about extensively. And you should read those works and take those to heart. And most importantly, you should not be a liar. You should have the courage of your convictions to say collectivism and and building a humane and sustainable economic system are worthy undertakings. And I will support other people who are doing that and not be a coward and call myself something else. Not do the thing that technologists do, which is try to every few months coming up with some new set of fancy terms and confusing technobabble. This is the master plan. This is the big important idea, and it's just some kind of incomprehensible kind of jargon. Um, these ideas have already been pretty well understood for quite some time. The path away from fascism and away from capitalists' climate apocalypse is pretty well understood. And if you are trying to say no, there's another way to do it. There's a third way. What you're really doing is crafting something that is less objectionable to the fascists than the anti-fascist position would be. And you shouldn't do that. You really shouldn't. Um, the next story is a little more, perhaps even transhumanist than the past two. You say, what's more transhumanist than robots and life extension breakthrough? This is an article in Popular Mechanics. Talked about Popular Mechanics before. Not the worst publication in existence in the United States, nor is it the best. Scientists are about to decide when to stop editing the perfect human. This kind of thinking, it doesn't so much dominate my thoughts now, but it was the thing that first interested me in tech accelerationist kind of ideas. And I'm a little embarrassed to say that because some of these things are at least a bit suggestive of social Darwinism and eugenics and things that perhaps should not be. Why would the popular imagination, when you say life extension, why would they immediately think of social Darwinists and eugenicists? Why would that be one among their first lines of thought when prompted with a discipline that's not directly related to that? Because of the people involved. Because a lot of these people are elitists of the highest order. They are eugenicists and social Darwinists. And I have contended on this program and in other forums and times that that is quite intentional. They are poisoning the well effectively. They are afraid of a techno revolution. These fascist master manipulators, these CIA operatives, for the sake of simplicity, very few of them have on their resume, I work for the CIA. A lot of them work for think tanks. A lot of them seem to have straight jobs in a corporation, but they really are doing the State Department's bidding, and that's true. Techno-futurists are just a kind of a subset of this larger tech world that's dominated by this. They are all very much dominated by this, and this is intentional because insofar as they can't completely dominate the narratives, completely control the technologies themselves, they will poison the well so that people associate this sort of thing with odious things that will easily be dismissed. So it's an all-around, across the boards, erosion of what are otherwise, in most cases, could be quite reasonable ideas, things that could be incorporated into activist conversations much more easily, but they aren't because these people have co-opted them and poisoned them. The possibilities are practically endless, talking about altering the human genome. So are the ethical concerns. This is by Tim Newcomb, and it was published on February 6, 2023. I think it's good to say the date. Now that human gene editing is real, the ethical questions are endless. A 3-day summit in London in March will focus on the ethical quandaries of gene editing in pursuit of the perfect human. Perfect human, huh? The science of genome editing is moving faster than any regulations around it. And One of the first talks at the planned Third International Summit on Human Genome Editing in March is called Hopes and Fears for Human Genome Editing. The panel is scheduled to last just 90 minutes, almost certainly not enough time to set the tone for a 3-day event focusing on the ethical questions surrounding the pursuit of the perfect human. In the most recent summit, which occurred in 2018 in Beijing, a scientist named He Jiankyu, sorry for the mispronunciation, shocked the world by unveiling he altered the genetics of 3 girls when they were just embryos. As this is a world that rocked your tech news feed and expanded out into other conversations outside of tech circles. It was this shocking, this alteration of the genetics of tiny embryos. This happened in 2018, 5 years ago. Notice there hasn't been another of this exact summit since until now. This man was jailed by the Chinese government for 3 years for his unethical practices, but since that time, the technology of genome editing has also progressed. In 2020, scientists were awarded the 2020 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for creating genetic scissors, a tool for rewriting the code of life. Genome editing has enormous power to benefit people. Robin Lovell-Badge, organizer of the London event, tells The Guardian, but we should be transparent about how it is being tried and tested before the technology is put into practice. How much can you trust London, the UK, one of the top fascist countries in history and in the world today? How much can you trust the United States and all of these fascist Western countries with the level of misinformation that they have, with the level of manipulation of various sectors to favor a lack of transparency, what is essentially a lack of transparency in service to the ruling elites that harms ordinary people? How much can you trust these people in the matter of this kind to be transparent about how the thing is being tried and tested? Not very much. You can't trust them at all. That's, again, the more you learn about the impact of emerging technology, the more you come to realize that we cannot open these various Pandora's boxes. Biotechnology and AI come to mind most readily, without first removing the fascist West from the equation. That is why I changed the way that I'm organizing these campaigns of mine to something of the kind that I described at the top of this show. A plan to end the United States, and hopefully to get people discussing this and supporting this campaign and writing me in, or as ballot access is expanded, voting for me on their ticket. Do you think it is likely that human beings alive today will experience gene editing to improve their lives or make them live longer? As a language model AI, I don't have personal opinions, but here's what I can say based on available information. Gene editing is a rapidly developing field of science and medicine with the potential to offer numerous benefits for human health. Gene editing technology such as CRISPR-Cas9 allows us for the precise modification of DNA in cells, which could be used to cure or prevent genetic diseases, improve human health, and extend lifespan. Currently, gene editing is being used to treat a small number of genetic conditions. There are ongoing clinical trials to test its safety and efficacy and effectiveness for a range of other diseases. However, it is important to note that there are significant scientific, ethical, and regulatory hurdles to overcome before gene editing can be widely used to enhance human health and longevity. Gene editing has the potential to have unintended consequences and could raise important ethical and social questions, so it would be important to proceed with caution and ensure that the technology is developed and used in a responsible and regulated manner. So to answer your question, it is possible that human beings alive today could experience gene editing to improve their lives and make them live longer, but this is still a developing field and much more research and regulatory oversight is needed before it can be widely used for these purposes. This is what you can do any day of the week at any time. If you go to chat.openai.com slash chat, you can chat.openai.com. You can refine some idea of yours. You can ask it almost any sort of question, no matter how absurd, or and it will make some attempt to answer it in a pretty well constructed way. You can see this question that I've asked. It relates to the discussion of this podcast. That was, but that was not written in advance. It was done in this moment, and you can use this sort of thing to add a good deal of clarity to many, many kinds of projects that you are working on. And I would um, encourage you to do it not just on behalf of your employer or to enrich um, your own for-profit undertaking, but use it in ways that to do your activist wish list, or even to undertake revolutionary projects with people in your community or people that you meet along the way, including Ben Zion, who is your friend, and who, if you ask something like this in a private conversation, or even better, on a forum, on one of these forums, you can't leave comments on the YouTube channel, but you can on the other social media. I might change that. It was just one of the default choices. I didn't really realize that it was actually being set to no comments at the time, but I haven't found the YouTube channel comments to be as insightful as in some of the other places. I am at your service in discussing matters of this kind. I'm not the world's smartest individual. The only really thing probably that I have going for me relative to other people is that I don't want the species to go extinct, and I don't like being deceived. Um, and uh, but in most other respects, synthesizing information that I'm getting from people who spent a good deal more time learning about these things than I have, most particularly um, collectivist thinkers and technologists, researchers, and so forth. Um, but nevertheless, even though I'm kind of a dum-dum, I'm at your service. I would like to do what I can to spearhead projects towards revolutionary action and world revolution in our time. As I've said on this show many times before, we will not see universal longevity, much less at the end of human misery in other areas short of that, without taking this kind of action and without specifically using advanced technology in defiance of the techno-fascists who control these things today in the West, using advanced technology to build better institutions. And it has to be organized at the grassroots level. That requires you to tell people that you know. You don't have to say the word techno-communism, but you should take these ideas to heart. And I would encourage you to maybe try to, it's a pretty good short phrase, right? It's not too complicated. It's not intentionally confusing, as technologists' jargon often seems to be, of this ideologically laden jargon. Thank you for your time.